So we'll move on to our meters and our hopper. Here we've got our M-set hopper with our V-set meter and our V-drive. We just want to do a visual inspection of the lid and the hopper assembly, look for any sort of cracking, any sort of problems visually. We won't jump into the meters and anything there. We do have another video series discussing meter maintenance. Good recommendation though, test your meters annually, whether you're running our V-set, our E-sets, or perhaps any of the OEMs. It's always a good practice. You can link to that video series in the description below. So we're going to move on from our parallel arms and down to our shank, our actual row unit shank assembly. This is the goal post here. This is of course the mounting area for our lower part of our parallel arms. The shank assembly is where our seed discs and of course our gauge wheel and our gauge wheel arms mount. We'll go ahead and just remove these here. So we've got our gauge wheel and our gauge wheel arm removed. We're going to go ahead and just remove our seed disc. We've got the washer and of course our disc. And inside here we can see we've got a handful of shims. We'll talk about those in a minute. This is our seed tube shank. Inside here we've got a couple of accessories. We can see for our Keeton seed firmer. We can see our seed tube here in the background. Alright, so we've got our seed discs removed. Inside here we can of course see the remainder, the rest of the shank assembly. We can see our seed tube guard here at the bottom. Oftentimes on these older planters, these roll pins that retain them, they're originally a 1/4 inch design. The hole in the bottom here does tend to get wore out. This one's got the larger 5/16 diameter roll pins. That's a common solution for repairing those holes when they do get enlarged. We want to make sure that we're inspecting this seed tube guard. These guys want to be about 15/16, 7/8 of an inch wide when they're new. This one is certainly worn down but is not completely wore out. We want to make sure that we're maintaining that width as much as possible. They obviously are a guard for our seed tube, but they do act a little bit like a scraper. We want to inspect the row unit shank on these earlier MaxEmerge Plus and MaxEmerge 2 row units. It's commonplace for them to crack in this area here, especially if they've maybe had some, not a lot of repair or maintenance done to them, and we've got, slopped out parallel arms. We have seen them crack. We want to take a visual look at our mustache here, which is our depth control attached to our T-handle. We just again want to look for fatigue, any cracking on the mustache themselves. We want to look in this area for wear. Alright, so another thing to consider while we're down here in this area on the shank and we've finished inspecting our seed tube guard is we'll inspect our Keetons if you're equipped with them. We've got 2 examples of our most common Keeton versions here. Both serve a similar function but obviously look a little bit different. We want to just inspect the Keeton visually, check the bottom of the Keeton for wear, uneven wear, make sure it's kind of a consistent profile here. For earlier Keetons, there is a recommendation on checking the spring tension that remains in the plastic and how to adjust and set them up. For these ones, these are our newest quick attach. They don't have any tension, no adjustment to be done. Same said for our low stick version. There is no adjustment, no tension there, but we want to make sure we just check the surfaces, check them for anything unusual, make sure we have seen if guys unintentionally back up with them in the ground, we will incur some damage up here at the mounting point. But basically just do a good visual inspection. You may have a liquid line with starter fertilizer or inoculant for soybeans. So just do a visual inspection and make sure everything's in order, that you don't have any leaks with that. So on the other end of the mustache here on our depth control, we can kind of see this one here has got a little bit of a divot. That's where that mustache rides. That does allow for some variation between row units as far as our desired depth, so that's one thing that we want to look at. These parallel arms are designed to be flipped from one side to the other, so if we do encounter wear on one side and the other side is still good, it is an option to extend the life of that arm to just flip it from one side to the other. One of the areas here for some wear consideration is this adjustable bushing that the gauge wheel mounts on. This is an earlier style that's original to this ME2. We can see that there are threads the full length of this bushing. This one is relatively tight, but they do inherently allow for some play between our gauge wheel and our seed discs. So there are some options there for replacement as well. Typically when we're upgrading, we would see these arms worn on both sides, and that would warrant a replacement. We'd upgrade to the new style that's out there on the market. So we've got our meter and our hopper removed, and we're going to move on to our seed and our seed tube assembly here. On this one, we just have a pin retaining it. We're going to go ahead and pull that out. We just want to look at the seed tube assembly. And this example, we're running a bullseye seed tube. We want to look down at the bottom here. Depending on how badly our seed tube guard is worn, we want to see if the discs have managed to wear away the side of the plastic. Sometimes in extreme cases, that plastic will curl inside, and we end up with a seed ricochet coming out of the seed tube. It deflects the seed, and then we end up with improper spacing. This bullseye seed tube, looks to be in good order, but we just want to do a visual inspection. Check any of the wires for chafing, for rubbing, make sure that hook is in good order. Oftentimes, if you look down inside that shank, we see that there gets to be quite a buildup of chaff and debris. Of course, this being our display stand, there is none, but good practice to blow that out and makes installation of the seed tube easier. So next, while we're down here, we're going to take a look. We've got a new disc here in front of us. New discs on a John Deere measure 15 inches. We recommend replacement at 14.5 inches. Various manufacturers have various specifications, and we can link to that information below as well. But we just want to visually inspect the bearing assembly, check the hub for any cracking, maybe give the bearing a spin. You can mount that on a bolt and a vise and give it a spin and see if you hear any sort of rough bearing or anything like that. Take a look visually at the edge, make sure there's no unusual wear patterns. Again, 15 inches is what we'd like to see new. Anything below 14.5 does require a replacement.